Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of electricairmobility.news. And today I have a really interesting article I've been working on for about a week right now, and it's about the differences between two companies you might have heard in advanced air mobility, Joby and Archer. Welcome to electricairmobility.news. My name is Nicholas Zart, and I am your host so far on this channel and mostly on the website electricairmobility.news. I'm also the founder of Electric Air Mobility LLC, and we are a consulting firm that helps with conceptualizations, designs, and implementations of what we call vertiports. They're modern heliports for the advanced air mobility industry, meaning those electric vertical and takeoff landing aircraft or eVTOLs. So what we do is we do everything around the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the energy, the storage, production management, terminals, vertipads, you name it. That's what we do. And how we do this is very simple. Over the 20 years of having been in this industry, well, I've met a lot of people, obviously. I've seen a lot of things that work, things that you shouldn't really do. And that's why I've been a consultant and a journalist for the last 17 years. And by having met so many people, having had so many direct interactions with a lot of OEMs, a lot of startups, I was able to really put together a unique ecosystem around vertiports that's pretty much, as far as I can see, unmatched out there. Challenge on. But today I really want to talk about probably the two biggest eVTOL makers out there in the field. And the way I wanted to write this article was to really get in the shoes of someone who knows just a little bit about advanced air mobility, but not all that much. So if you listen to mainstream news media, basically what's happening out there is you have Joby and you have Archer. No, it's fair to say they're probably the best funded ones out there. They're definitely the most vocal, but I really wouldn't call it that they're the two leading key players in this industry. That's not really fair. I think Beta Technologies definitely is up there, and probably on an equal footing, as well as Autoflight would be a good example too, with lots of speed records. SkyDrive, the three-seater eVTOL that's already in production today. So there are a lot of companies out there that are really good. On top of it, I mean, I've also worked with a few of these companies, so I know the inside stories, but which will never be said here, by the way. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on Joby versus Archer, since that's how the mainstream news likes to put it. And also to show that there are no two different companies in the AAM industry. They're wildly different from culture, from business model, from everything you can think of. And I wanted to explain that by basically making it into two parts. So the first part we'll go look at Joby mostly, and the second part we'll look at Archer and we'll include the conclusion in it. But so far, the introduction to both is really that both companies, meaning Joby and Archer, offer a four-seat plus pilot eVTOL, and they more or less have the same specs. They kind of look the same, I guess, in terms of operations. Definitely not in terms of aesthetic and design. I've also seen, by the way, so this is where I should come clean. I've seen the Joby S4 fly. I saw it, and you'll see the pictures in there are my pictures. I saw it take off, and then I saw it flying with next to a chaser, a fixed-wing chaser. But I want to say something a little bit about that. There's a lot of talk about how loud these eVTOLs are going to be. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now, if you know anything about acoustics, first of all, yes, a helicopter's acoustic signal is horizontal, meaning it spreads this way. That's why you hear it. And when you hear it up in the air, that's usually because the helicopter pilot is having fun and really playing in on those rotors, and that's why you hear that big flop, flop, flop. With eVTOLs, it's very different. They're not rotors, they're propellers. Very different. Rotors are big, propellers are much smaller. They're usually what propels an airplane. And so the acoustic signature is really like a funnel. So if you're directly under it, it's going to be loud. If you're directly over it, it's going to be loud. Frankly said, you wouldn't want to be above or under an eVTOL when it takes off or when it flies. Well, when it flies, maybe horizontally. So what I heard from, let's say, maybe 20, 30, 50, no more than 50 yards away, is yeah, you heard the whiz, and it was a cool whiz. It's not like a pata pata noise or anything like that. It was a whiz. So you hear that whirl, and it dissipates within about 100 feet, and to the point where maybe at about 150 feet I couldn't really hear it. Tell you what I could hear all the time was the single propeller fixed wing chaser. That one I could hear it even way up there, and I think they were hovering at about 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. The highlight of that day, which probably was the highlight of my career, at least when it comes to advanced air mobility, was at one point Joby's eVTOL was flying, chased by the fixed wing, and a big, humongous Leonardo Coast Guard Leonardo came in and was practicing landings and taking off, touchdowns and taking off. And I gotta tell you, out of all three, you would have thought maybe the eVTOL was louder, or maybe the fixed wing was louder. No, the helicopter was by far the loudest. And yes, to be fair, it's one of the biggest helicopters out there, but it drowned everything. You couldn't hear anything else. So that was my my take on the Joby. I did see the Archer maker take off and transition into a flight. We were also there. It was a few days away from seeing Joby, and I was also there at the midnight release. And I've got some really cool pictures of both the maker and the midnight. And again, although this time for Archer we were much further away, so we really couldn't hear it, and it was chased by a helicopter, so it was kind of hard to gauge the noise level. But suffice it to say, eVTOLs are not as noisy as some people would like to make it seem. So we said both really offer four-seaters, one pilot, but they're not the only ones, right? A lot of other companies are also offering that. The difference now, and now we're going to get into the Joby side of thing. Joby has been around for a very long time. It's been around for well over a decade, and if I remember well, somewhere around 2008, 2009, they started working on this concept of electrifying a multi-propeller aircraft, hence an eVTOL. So it probably explains why they've had the longest to think about business models and everything. But this is where Joby has really challenged the entire aerospace or the entire aviation industry by saying, we're going to be vertically integrated. Now, what does that mean? That means we're going to be manufacturing everything. And strictly speaking, vertically integrated would be that they would have to make the rubber of the wheels all the way up to the propellers, all the way up to the operations, all the way up to the maintenance and everything around it, which, by the way, includes infrastructure, right? So, yes and no. They will do probably about, I would say, 80 to 95% of everything that they need to design, build, and operate an eVTOL operations structure, right? So that gives them, in theory, a complete handle on the quality of its product and services, meaning by being the supply chain, by making sure they make everything, they really can figure out what are the best tools, how to do it the best way, and theoretically also be the quickest doing it. Again, they've been around for a long time, so they do have that leeway or that extra jump compared to Archer that's been around only for a few years. But wait till you see about Archer. Archer has a different philosophy, and it's really hard to say at this stage who will come out first, but both have a lot of pros and, of course, some cons. That's totally normal in our industry. So it's important to say that the reason why Joby decided to embrace this vertically integrated idea is that, A, they've been along for a long time. They've been along for a decade and a half, but they also have a lot of money to do these things. So they have the extra cushion to really go, hey, if we're going to do this, let's do it perfectly the way it should be and everything. And so they have Toyota. Toyota is the biggest external investor of Joby right now. And I got to tell you one thing, Toyota bends over backwards to make sure that Joby has the right ways of manufacturing the tools that they need for the right solutions. And that goes a long way. If you know what Toyota has done for the mobility industry in general, you know what it means, right? But they also have received a lot of money in the past. So I want to touch base also on something that's really important, because when you say integrated, virtually integrated, vertically integrated, you're saying, well, you're going to do everything else, so long, we don't need you, that kind of thing. Well, not necessarily. Joby needs us vertiport people, infrastructure people, but they also need cities, they need airlines, and so they've partnered with a lot of people. The last one, which was probably the biggest one to date, is a memorandum of understanding with the city of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. And it was after having signed an eyebrow-raising 6-year deal, exclusive deal with Dubai. Now it's with the Abu Dhabi government. And if you know how the UAE works, it's pretty interesting. There are a lot of different emirates inside the UAE, and each have their own autonomy. So this really will be interesting because it's laying out the foundations of flying in the two most popular places in the UAE, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. But wait, there's more. As far as the regulatory framework development, Joby has always worked very closely with the General Civil Aviation Authority, GCA, and of the UAE in this particular case. So they're able to work with them and work in tandem with the FAA. Now this is huge because they've, again, have been working with the FAA for a very long time. And we can probably credit them for a lot of the work that the FAA has done because of what Joby was helping them do. So that really helps everybody across the world. The Skyports collaboration, that's something I have to say as an infrastructure person made me kind of scratch my head and go, that's interesting. So they're going to use Skyports for their infrastructure. All right, okay. That's also a big company that has a lot of vertiport designs and everything, and we'll see how that works. That's really interesting. But the ones that I thought were probably the most telltale is that Joby didn't insist solely on making airline connections the way that other eVTOL makers have done. But why should they? They clinched Delta Airlines. I mean, that's huge to say that, hey, Delta believes in you. They're going to partner with you. We'll look at who Archer partnered with. So they also partnered with the UAE Smart Autonomous Vehicle Industry, Savvy, which will help them develop a lot of the potential around advanced air mobility and what I love to call the convergence of mobility. So on the Joby's technical advancements, and this is where Joby really wildly differs from Archer and everybody else to a certain extent, maybe less with other companies like Beta, but Joby decided to use additive manufacturing. And that is really interesting because it's one of the things that advanced air mobility has unleashed in the creative minds of engineers and designers, is that you not only have now aluminum, which is really 90% of what airplanes are made out of when it comes to structural design, right? But now we can use thermoplastics, we can look at composite materials, we can look at fiberglass, carbon fiber, and things like that. So Joby has really decided to go straight down that, and additive manufacturing is way more complex. We'll go to that part some other time because I can go into a silo right there that will leave us with a 45-minute video. But this basically, just as it does with cars and boats, it means lighter weight, more durable structures, reducing weight, improving energy efficiency, so on and so forth, okay? One thing that they did, which I thought was very interesting and maybe one of the highlighted difference between them and, say, Tesla, is Tesla probably is closer to Archer in many ways, that they decided to keep some things in-house but really outsource everything else. And Tesla went for, which back then was absolutely brilliant, was to use those rechargeable Panasonic batteries that we all know and love. Well, Joby decided, no, we're going to go with pouch cells for their eVTOLs. Now, for those of you who understand batteries, there's a lot of pros and cons to that. Pouch cells are great. They probably hold, a lot more potential than cylindrical cells. And one of the great things is that you can stack them pretty well. You can also put them in lots of places where a cylinder might not always be the best bet. So there's a lot of pros and cons about that one. Mostly, and this is really the linchpin of Joby's difference from everybody else, is that its vertical integration extends way beyond manufacturing. And this is the really interesting part. They're developing their own electric motors. Now, this is huge. Their own flight control system, software. So it really means that this is the Uber, no pun intended. They were also, by the way, partnered with Uber, and some of you probably remember what happened a long time ago in 2018, 2019. But that means that they can really integrate everything pretty well because they A, designed it, B, they are building it, so they have control of that whole supply chain. Very, very, very interesting. Joby's financials. This is something I'll let you read on the website because it goes a little bit into how they see their vertical integration as a plus instead of as naysayers are saying, never done, very difficult. I don't know if they'll be able to do it. So let's just talk about the white elephant in the room is when you talk about vertical integration in the aerospace system, there's always one name that comes back and that says it doesn't work, right? And that's Boeing. Boeing in the 1920s, 1930s did everything, right? They did the airframe, they did the motors, and they did the operation. So they really took care of all three pillars, and that didn't work. So that was split up into three companies. Boeing still makes, hopefully, still makes the airframe, but Pratt and Whitney was the spin-off of the engines, which, by the way, powers some of the Boeings and, of course, also some of the Airbuses. And United Airlines became the operations of Boeing. So naysayers point to that Boeing couldn't do it. Why can Joby do it? So Joby says, well, hang on a second, Boeing couldn't do it. Spun off these two other companies, but look at where they are now. In the 1990s, they tried to do exactly what Airbus is doing, and Airbus was designed from the get-go to be a multifaceted integrator, right? To have this over there, this build over here, this build over there. Everything is built everywhere and then shipped to Toulouse where it's put together. So a transition from a company that engineers everything on its own to a Airbus kind of company is very difficult. It takes a long time. And as we're seeing now, has pretty much failed unless somehow Boeing can show us that we're wrong. But today, the 737 MAX problems, the 787 problems, the 777 problems, and by the way, even the 747 I-8 have had a lot of problems because of this philosophy of trying to get things from other places. I have friends who work at Spirit. I know how hard it is to design something, especially in these modern days and times when both Airbus and Boeing are saying quicker, faster, cheaper. That puts a lot of pressure, and of course, that means potential problems always happening. So anyway, we hope you enjoy this first part into Joby. It's a very complex company, and I have to say I have a lot of respect for Joby and Archer because if I was in his place, I would do the same. You know, as a CEO of my company, as an entrepreneur, I would do the same if I had that leeway and if I had enough cash. I would definitely do the same thing. It's interesting to know that the last automotive company that did everything from scratch, that was vertically integrated, was Jaguar. And Jaguar, unfortunately, and this is also a very long story, but the British automotive industry collapsed in the 1980s, and there are plenty of reasons. And Viper tongues will say that after that they came over to Detroit and they started doing the same, which I find kind of humorous, but a little bit of a stretch. However, Jaguar eventually had to say, stop, we can't do it. I mean, right down to the cigarette lighters, right? I mean, this is really very intensive stuff. They stopped doing that, obviously. They were then bought over by Ford, and of course, well, we know what happened after that. So it's a challenge. It's wildly fascinating. I think almost everybody cheers for Joby to really do it and everything, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So next, stay tuned for we all going to take a same look at Archer, how it differs both in terms of cultures, philosophy, how it manages its supply chain, what it chooses to do in-house, and what it doesn't do in-house. And I was there at the midnight unveiling. I saw some very interesting things and can't wait to talk to you about it next. Thank you. And please like, comment, subscribe, share. And I think my Patreon site is almost going to be ready in about maybe a year. Thank you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow again.